An appeal to logos persuades a targeted audience through reasoning, or logic. In simpler terms, a writer uses facts, expert testimony, counter-arguments, careful structure, etc. to support her main idea. Let's take a look at an appeal to logos in action. Let's say you wanted to sell this car. Of course, someone will most likely ask, why? This, of course, is your cue to appeal to logos. Since you're trying to sell a car, you might point out important facts about the car. You could say, at 33 miles per gallon, this car has exceptional gas mileage. You could also point out that the car includes a variety of safety features, including automated emergency braking, etc., etc. You could also provide expert testimony. For example, Car and Driver magazine rated this car's performance as first in its class. And since cost is a primary factor for most car buyers, you could make a cost comparison to other cars. As you can see, an appeal to logos guides an audience's thinking. In this example, the speaker guides the audience to all the reasons this car makes for a reasonable purchase. He establishes that the car has good gas mileage, is safe, performs well, and is affordable. All these facts put together lead the audience to one conclusion: this car is worth buying. As a side note, an effective appeal to logos seldom relies on a single piece of evidence or fact. Instead, a speaker typically relies on a variety of evidence to build her argument because, generally speaking, more evidence makes for a more compelling argument. Appeals to logos exist everywhere, on TV, the internet, most advertisements, and everyday conversations, especially those with parents. A speaker establishes logos through what he or she says in the text. Some rhetorical choices that appeal to logos include facts, examples, relevant anecdotes, counter-argument, expert testimony, conditional or if-then statements, causation, and comparison. We're going to take another look at an appeal to logos, this time in a speech by Denzel Washington, a speech he entitles Fall Forward. So before we take a look at parts of the speech, let's look at the rhetorical situation. First, the subject is failure. The occasion, it's May 16, 2011, at the University of Pennsylvania, an Ivy League school. The exigence is graduation, and a commonly held idea that we need to consider as well is this idea that people should have a backup plan to fall back on if they fail to reach their goals. The audience, the group of Penn graduates, high-achieving students at that. The purpose is to persuade Penn graduates not to fear failure, but to embrace it. And if you don't know who the speaker is, it's Denzel Washington, and you can read the rest there on your own. Three things stand out in this rhetorical situation: the occasion, the audience, and the purpose. Accepting failure may not be a message Ivy League students are willing to accept. That's Washington's primary obstacle. Ivy League students, by and large, are high-achieving and have strong work ethics. Outright failure, the kind Washington will address, may not be something they're accustomed to. So Washington has to make an effective appeal to logos to convince them that embracing failure has its merits. Let's see how he did this. Early in his speech, Washington says, Reggie Jackson struck out 2,600 times in his career, the most in the history of baseball. But you don't hear about the strikeouts. People remember the home runs. Fall forward. Thomas Edison conducted 1,000 failed experiments. Did you know that? I didn't either, because 1001 was the light bulb. In this appeal to logos, Washington makes references to two historical figures who experienced failure: Reggie Jackson, a legendary baseball player, and Thomas Edison, a scientist almost everyone learns about in grade school. These men exemplify Washington's point. Neither gave up in the face of failure and ultimately found success in their respective fields. As such, their examples might appeal to skeptical Penn students. Washington also makes a smart choice to use two examples because if the audience doesn't know one of these historical figures, they're likely to know the other. Hopefully, at least. Later, he says, you will fail at some point in your life. Accept it. That's probably not a traditional message for a graduation ceremony. But hey, I'm telling you, embrace it, because it's inevitable. And I should know, in the acting business, you fail all the time. In another appeal to logos, Washington uses relevant anecdotes from his life. He elaborates on his acting career. He says, Early in my career, I auditioned for a part in a Broadway musical. A perfect role for me, I thought, except for the fact that I can't sing. But after the first verse, the director cuts me off. Thank you. Thank you very much. You'll be hearing from me. He then says, I walked out of there to prepare for the next audition, and the next audition, and the next one. I prayed and I prayed, but I continued to fail, and I failed, and I failed. Washington's anecdotes are particularly persuasive because he is one of the most famous actors in the country, and has been for at least 30 years. Many people see famous actors as lucky and seldom, if ever, consider the obstacles they faced. But Washington certainly faced some obstacles. His life is a testament to the power of perseverance and embracing failure. His example and those of Reggie Jackson and Thomas Edison helped to convince his audience that failure isn't always so terrible, that it may be a vital ingredient to success. So, how do we analyze and appeal to logos? We start with this key question. How does the speaker build and support her argument? To answer this, we must do the following. 1. Read and annotate the text. An obvious first step, right? 2. Examine the rhetorical situation, which is absolutely critical. When students submit weak essays, it's often because they didn't consider the occasion or audience. Remember, the elements of the rhetorical situation impact the creation of the text. If you fail to acknowledge these elements, then you might fail to understand why the author made particular rhetorical choices. 3. Identify the author's rhetorical choices. We've already discussed the rhetorical choices commonly used to build and appeal to logos, so we'll focus on those. 4. Explain the most significant rhetorical choices, those that impact the audience and support the author's purpose. To make sense of all this, let's analyze Denzel Washington's appeal to logos. Let's pretend we read and annotated the entire text. Since we've already examined Washington's rhetorical situation and identified his most significant rhetorical choices, let's move on to step 4, explaining his rhetorical choices. But let's briefly review structure. Now, rhetorical analysis and writing in general can take many shapes, but I'm going to focus on a popular structure often used for the AP exam. First, you need a claim wherein you identify the rhetorical situation, at least one rhetorical choice the speaker makes to build logos, and the effect of that choice. Second, provide evidence, namely a direct quote. Do not paraphrase or summarize. Third, provide commentary in which you explain the significance of the quote you selected. Since this is a rhetorical analysis, you must focus on the audience and explain how the speaker's rhetorical choices impacts the audience, specifically to accept his purpose. Let's examine some writing. If you've seen my video on ethos, you know I use the same examples to illustrate how Denzel Washington appeals to ethos. A common misconception is that a speaker must make different rhetorical choices to create each logical appeal, but that isn't the case. The reality is that the appeals are not mutually exclusive. A well-crafted rhetorical choice may create ethos, pathos, and logos. Something to keep in mind. Here is a paragraph on Denzel Washington's speech. In the opening of his commencement speech, Fall Forward, Denzel Washington, an Academy Award-winning actor, references historical figures to convince Penn students that they should embrace failure. When Washington describes how Reggie Jackson, a famous baseball player, struck out 2,600 times, and how Thomas Edison, a famous inventor, conducted 1,000 failed experiments, he establishes the simple fact that failure can happen to the greatest of people. However, these examples illustrate that it is what you do after failure that matters most. Neither Jackson nor Edison gave up. They persevered with their endeavors and ultimately found success. By exemplifying the ubiquitous and invincible nature of failure, Washington appeals to his audience's fear of failure and convinces them that failure is, in fact, nothing to fear, an essential step toward success. Let's review what the writer did. First, note how the speaker's claim identifies the rhetorical situation: speaker, audience, occasion, purpose, and subject. For evidence, note how the writer uses brief quotes, specifically the parts a student will explain. Moreover, the writer also embeds a quote as opposed to using a signal phrase to introduce a quote. Embedding quotes enhances the flow of the writing. This, of course, takes practice and paraphrase skills, but it's a skill worth developing. In the explanation, the writer makes a clear inference. Specifically, the writer unpacks or explains Washington's reasoning, which is essential when you analyze and appeal to logos. Note, though, that the writer's explanation isn't limited to one sentence. She builds and develops that idea that it is what you do after failure that matters the most. Lastly, the writer explains the rhetorical choice's impact on the audience. This is another essential aspect of an appeal to logos. Note how the writer clearly explains how Washington's references to historical figures impacts the audience's thinking. He taps into their fear of failure, and by using relevant references to historical figures in Reggie Jackson and Thomas Edison, relieves them of that fear. And this concludes our brief overview of logos and analyzing logos.